evening, everyone. It's so great to see you all. Come on in. We'll wait for the last few people to just come. There's some seats. There's a seat there for you. There's a seat over there. There's a bench on the back. So my name is Lynn Ann Polite, and I'm the gallery director and curator here at VCA Gallery. And I welcome you all to a panel discussion called Art Becomes You. I'm going to be the panel moderator tonight. I'd like to go, what we'll do is I'll go through some questions with them, and then we'll have hopefully some time for some Q&A at the end. First, I'd like to introduce our panel, our grouping here. We've got Brian here. Brian's lived on and made art on Vashon, Washington since 1989. He shows locally, regionally, and has for many years exhibited at the Robbie King Gallery on Bainbridge. He has a long association with our local print cooperative, Quartermaster, having first joined in 1997, just last, whatever century. He is the past president of Viva, Vashon Island artist, visual artist, and is a founding member of the Co-op Swiftwater Gallery that just recently opened here in the Uptown. Kathy Sarkowski says art is the foundation of her life. She's a painter, a collector, a seeker of vivid expressions of humanity. She sees curiosity as an impetus to go deeper creatively, to explore ideas and investigate meaning. Whether actively engaging in fine art as a professional passion or simply experiencing daily life as a maker, she is inspired by the promise of creative freedom and fascinated by the process of surrender necessary to access that potential. She has been showing in galleries since 1992, and she is the founder and owner of the Vashon Artist Residency here on Vashon. Morgan Brigg. Morgan's copper and enamel wall sculptures and 3D have been exhibited in solo and group exhibitions in gallery throughout the United States and abroad, including the Patricia Rozar, thank you, Gallery in Seattle. She's been in Sun Valley, Idaho, Laguna Beach, the Seattle Art Museum of Rentals and Sales Gallery in Seattle, and in London, England. In addition, her public work and corporate collections included in the Swedish Hospital and Braidbridge Art Museum. By the way, she also has collections in public schools. And last is, on the end, is Erin Schultz. She started studying art at an early age in Yakima, Washington, and continued studying with a focus on classical realism in oil, portrait, figure, and still life. Ironically, she was first exposed to classical realism teaching in China, where she had private instruction in portraiture. She continues her studies at Gage Academy in Seattle, Grand Central Academy in New York, and Florence Academy of Art in Italy. So it's quite an esteemed panel. Just for reference, Erin's art is behind here. That's Erin. Brian is on the right side, and the back is Joan Hammer, who is another one in this show. Morgan's is the sculptures. On the left is Kathy Sarkowski, and also Pam Ingalls, who's currently doing a retreat in Italy with a bunch of students. So I just want to tell you how this came about. This show and this panel discussion is during COVID. Remember that thing we dealt with? We were all thinking of ways to do different things, and I came up with this idea to see if the gallery here, VCA, for the first time could actually represent a body of work. And because we're in COVID, we'd have a show live, but then also represent it online for a series of months. And these four were four of the artists that jumped on that bandwagon with me and were very supportive through COVID, and we did 3 shows called The Notable Collection. Last year, knowing that COVID was over, we sat down as a group and said, what next? And in there came some words of wisdom, and it was that we'd like to gift our experience and what art is for us to the community. So they have donated their time to come here tonight to gift all of us a really lively discussion about the topic. The topic is Art Becomes You. However, and honestly, it started out as Art Becomes Us, and I have no idea how that got switched. But I will probably say it was me. And it's interesting because I think it still has a double entendre. How art is becoming me, and it's becoming to me, and it's becoming to you, and all those different ways. So it actually, you'll see some of the wall statements actually say art becomes us, and I left it because that's what inspired them, and then the title of these cabins, art becomes you. But I find that words are pretty powerful in that way, just depending on how we use them and what we use. So that's going to be my first question for each of the panelists, is when we talked about art becomes us or art becomes you, what does that mean to you as an artist? And we'll start with Brian.
Well, when I thought about this, I thought about how I work personally, which often begins as a story that I arrived at or looked for or thought about because I was looking for answers, and then the art, that's the visual part of that, is part of that process of figuring out what I was trying to figure out. So it does literally become part of me, and part of my brain certainly, in that process. Print, for me, is where I go because it also has its own way of leading one on. Its story is do this next and now do this, and you could do this, and at some point you're trying to figure out what you've done. So again, it's like this circular thing, like art becomes us, art becomes itself. So that's where I was.
Thanks, Kathy.
I really did not like this topic. And then, so no offense. I struggled with it, but then I realized it didn't really matter. Whatever I was going to make actually fit the topic, right? So whatever I do is about me becoming the next iteration through that very work. And so the work that I ended up making was a series that I'll continue working on, which kind of has its own title and its own life, I guess, but it still is very much in this realm of art becomes you, art becomes us, art is everything. And I think for me, you know, it doesn't matter whether I'm at the grocery store, or I'm just taking a walk, or I'm sitting staring out the window, or I'm actually in my studio working. All of those things seem to add up to what I end up making in some way. Whether that way is clear to me or not isn't even that important. I just, through the years, have really come to understand that the process is not just about what happens in the studio, it's about living a life as a person who's a creative, and I think everything informs everything else, the good, the bad, the ugly, the beautiful. And sometimes it's things I've been thinking about for a long time, but haven't known how to express them. And other times it's something that's just super clear to me and has literally just popped up. And the series that I'm working on that you see in the gallery is something I've been thinking about for a long time. I really didn't know how to express it. And so I'm grateful because this particular topic, as much as I resisted it, kind of opened that door for me.
Thank you. And Morgan?
I think for me it was something way more emotional, and when I did the whole thing about the dreaming and when we fall asleep, I was interested in how I felt it was a continuous path that would take us eventually to death, and it's just a matter of each night we turn around a lot quicker than that. It's like, no, I'm not going to do the death thing yet, so you come around. But in those journeys, and I think this is universal, there are caricatures or there's just feelings of emotions that are in my dreams at night, and they always seem to inform me in some way, and I also feel like it informs each of us. And so that I was wanting to capture that universal quality of sleep and the messages that get sent to us, whether you know what they mean or not. And so that's art too. I mean, whatever you're dreaming of is certainly art, and so it's not only coming to you, it's coming to all of us. So it's kind of this big mess, but it's, you know, art becomes me and it becomes you too. So that's where I took it.
Thank you. Erin?
Yeah, so for me, when I'm painting a lot, literally everything looks like a painting. When I look at you guys, I'm thinking, you're all brushstrokes. and that's where I get my inspiration for my work, is really just having my eyes open and just experiencing, you know, daily, you know, walks or, you know, visiting with folks, seeing a dog in the park, you name it. So for me, art really is, like, it is the way I interact with the world when I'm really in that painting zone. And then with this show, just thinking about, you know, how that's just the first step of the art process. So then there's also the creating the piece and, you know, what you're taking from the world and, in my case, putting it on canvas. And then what reaction do people have to that? So again, it's that cycle that you guys have talked about. And so really it's, you know, I'm able to bring you into my art world through my paintings, and then in these pieces, just touching on all the different types of art. So there's dance, there's music. So just looking at art broadly and how we're touched by it daily.
Thanks. I'm going to go a little more personal with you guys. And by the way, they don't know these questions. I did not tell them. Yes. So, what event or thought or feeling maybe compelled you to become an artist, or when did you realize you were one? And I'm going to start in a different order so that Brian's not always hit first. Morgan, you're up.
I started out as a graphic designer my first 15 years of my career were being a graphic designer and coming up with package designs for all sorts of bad products. But anyway, and I was like immersed in corporate America, and that whole culture wasn't really my culture either. So I think when I had the big aha was after being to some of these meetings and realizing that I was really sick and tired as a graphic designer of telling the client's story. I was telling everyone else's story, and I wanted to tell my own. And so, right in that moment, I realized, okay, then I'll go ahead and make a plan and escape this place and, and start telling my own story. And if it didn't work out for the first year, because I had kind of saved enough money to do it for 1 year, then I would go on to plan B. I didn't know what plan B was at the time, but it didn't matter because I was just going to give it my absolute all to make it work. And it did.
Kathy?
Interestingly, I have kind of a similar story, but I want to say at the start that I think I probably was always an artist. I don't think I allowed myself to be fully. But I worked in film production and I went to film school, and I loved what I was doing and I was good at it. But what I was doing was creative problem solving. I was not creating. I was helping other people create. And I loved film dearly, and it took me a long time to figure out what I loved about film, what I took away from film. And when I was working on, I was thinking about becoming a producer, and I had done a little bit of that. And what I realized is you had to really love a story and be able to sell a story and tell a story. And that you had to have a number of those stories going in order to actually get that into the universe. If you had 5, maybe 1 was going to hit if you were even lucky. And I realized at one point it was not the story that I loved. What I take away from films are visual snapshots. And I just walked away from film and realized I was just going to act as if I was an artist. I was going to get a studio, and I was just going to do what I could. And I was super lucky. A woman named Linda Cannon opened a brand new gallery down in Pioneer Square, and she was taking people, and I got a gallery right away. I got accepted into Skowhegan, this very prestigious residency program, within like a year and a half of painting. I had a lot of things happen that helped me feel encouraged, you know, and also I was not that young. I was in my early 30s, I think, maybe, yeah, and maybe a little older than that. And so I already had some savings. I wasn't super young, and I was able to walk away and also have like, okay, I'm going to do this for a year and just see how it goes. And I've never had to look back. And I think, though, the one thing I want to say is, you know, for me, it's not a straight line. I don't think life is a straight line, and so neither is making art. I've had, you know, periods where it was harder to work, harder to feel like I was creating something fresh and exciting. I also was lucky enough to have a child, my son Max, and I had to find different ways to create at different times in my life because I had less time or less energy or whatever. And I have really liked those challenges. I think that they've made me a better artist. And I feel really grateful in a way that I came to it later, because there's a lot of rejection involved in being an artist, and there's also a lot of sort of organizational stuff that nobody ever knows about, like, you know, except for Kim back there. You know, doing an inventory and getting your work professionally photographed or learning how to do that yourself, getting it framed, pricing it, titling it, you know, lots of things. And by the time I started doing it, you know, nothing kind of fazed me. And I had the organizational stuff down, and that left me free to create, which was pretty fantastic. So.
Great. Erin, you want to go?
Oh, yeah, sure. So I've always, ever since I was little, I would do artwork, and I would take, you know, summer classes. I'm always taking it in school. I went to a special pull-out program in elementary school, but I never, and people call me an artist, and they never thought of myself as an artist ever. And it wasn't until I made that decision that I remember the moment. It was at Gage Academy with Juliet Aristides, and I was painting a knee. And I feel like I just got it. It's like, okay, I figured this out. And I declared to Gary Fagan, the head of the school, that this is what I'm going to do. This is what I do. And I'm going to be an artist. And so at that point, that's when I really wanted to become a professional artist. But nothing really changed. I continue to I'm a researcher, and the process of researching, kind of quantitative and statistics, is very similar to my artwork in that you make these observations, and then you render some story, some realistic story. Exactly like realist painting, where you're collecting data and you're rendering a story. So to me, my research work and my artwork was very similar. And so while the transition from my academic work to my artistic work, it was more just a decision in my title more than anything else. So I was probably always an artist by heart, in my heart and in practice, but never considered myself an artist until that moment at Gage Academy.
While you were painting a knee.
Exactly.
Would
you ask that question again? I keyed in on so many things that I've said.
Sure.
And what event or thought or feeling compelled you to become an artist, or when did you realize you were one?
Oh, okay. So I can't remember not being an artist. To be honest, my earliest memories are going to painting classes with my mother. My father went back to school to get his master's in about 1960. I was born in 56, so I would have been about 4 years old when you could do such things, go to college with your mother. So my earliest memories are, I like linseed oil, paint smell, and making pottery with her. So those are my earliest memories of art, and I kind of never stopped doing it. There were always art materials and an abundance of them in our home. My father was a school administrator, and during the summer I would raid the school's cabinets full of construction paper and do collage stuff, which incidentally I'm kind of doing that right now to figure out what I'm doing next, is do paper cut stuff with construction paper, which is right back where I started. So I guess the answer is I've always considered myself an artist. My career and the way that I've made money is I have an architectural degree, but I never really did that much design work with that. I have mostly done illustration work for pre-built things. So through the years, Peter, my husband, and I had an illustration company. So we did that. And my house was always, the whole house was a studio. I didn't see anything wrong with that. So, yeah.
There's one thing that I heard a theme, and you didn't bring up the word story, but I know that your art is based on story. But you all brought up story and how story, so I want to just go down that little route there about within your art or your personal, how does story, the word story or the thing about stories, interplay with your art, motivate your art, is your art? And any of you, just jump in whenever you want, anybody.
I would love to speak to that because that really is what motivates me in my image making. I'm not an abstract artist per se, although sometimes it appears that way. I actually love story, and we are all about story. That's how we make sense of the world, and without it, even with conflicting stories, we're still making sense of the world just by listening to what someone says and someone else says, and those things become either a reality that the lens that we see the world through, or we reject them. And then I just selected at an early time a Western myth as subject because it is all connected. And beyond just Western myth, it's connected to all kinds of other societal myth. So it's an endless thread that you can pull, and it never stops. And I'm always learning something new, and or I'm remembering something I forgot. That part of the story is incredibly important to me and to what I make.
Anybody else?
I have something to say on that. I think primarily when I make my work, I am starting out without an idea, without a concept. I love the part where it just sort of comes through me, and things start to appear as I start putting different pieces together. And what I love about that at the very end is that there is a story, or I see a story right away that comes out of it then, and I know that it applies to me. And even if I didn't know what that story was before, it becomes really clear, and I have a new understanding about myself through this story. And not only that, but when I put it out into the world, other people have that, many times other people will connect to it by saying, oh, I totally have that story too. And so it's this thing about being seen and about not being alone for me in this world when I have that connection with the people that view my work.
I'll add to that. I like, in terms of the story, I love watching programs where there's a lot of character development. I love characters. I love to get to know somebody. And I think with my work, that's what I'm building, are characters. And when I start a painting, I've got the concept, but I really don't know who's going to be in there in the painting until it's done. And so the character develops as I'm painting, and the atmosphere and everything else. So it's a bit of a discovery process where you get to know this character in the painting as you're painting.
So I don't really feel like I am trying to tell you a story. I think my work evolves from stories of my own life and things that interest me and that I'm curious about and that I pursue and experiences I've had and blah, blah, blah. But I really hesitate to direct the viewer or collector or appreciator too terribly much. We are encouraged almost always to write artist statements. I am very thoughtful. I do a lot of research about my work. I have to say, I don't know that it's that important that you get what it is I was trying to achieve. There's a lot of different levels. I want the work to be beautiful. You know, the topic of this series is the desire to be special. Yeah, we all want to be seen, you know, at least through our work. Some of us more or less in terms of our own person. But I don't really want to direct people. I'm happy to have people. I know that my work is not everyone's cup of tea. You know, that's like a given. And for those who are attracted to it, people see different things and find different things from it. And I do think it's impossible for there not to be some kind of story in there because artwork is personal, but it's for me not about telling stories. It's about creating images.
I think, I just think that the storyline that you all had, it's still stories, but how it impacted you is so different in how you use it. But you all, like I said, you all used it in your description about stories. So I wanted to go on to what you actually work in, because you all are creatives, but you all write, and there's 3 2D artists and 1 sculpture, Morgan. So what about your medium? Like, why did you choose it, or what about it resonates with you? You know, what is it that either the medium itself, like what you're painting, and the style of it? I mean, just like, you all have these similar desires to be creative, and you have these ideas and these stories, but you chose a particular way to express it. So I'm wondering if there's any insight on why you chose what you chose. And I'm going to again, just jump in.
I'll go first on this one. So I love paper, and there's a kind of discouragement in the art world, a kind of prejudice almost in the art world against paper because it doesn't sell for as much, and because it's sometimes in editions and whatever. And I've just given myself permission over the last number of years to work with it because I love it. And I was gifted a small box of Japanese watercolors. They're called Gansai, and they're kind of on the spectrum, like a midway between traditional watercolor, like European watercolors, and gouache. So they're gouachier than regular watercolor. And I started playing around with them, and they're integrated into some work that I've been doing for the last 3 or 4 years. But I've turned my attention to pretty much exclusively working with them, and this series is just working with them and pushing them and pulling them and seeing what constraints they have and what freedom they offer, and using some graphite, just using a drawing as well. And I think for me, it's an expression like the brooches are being used as an idea of adornment or embellishment, and they seem to me almost like they are each kind of characters, you know, and while they are inspired by actual brooches and images of brooches, they're not meant necessarily to be realistic renditions of those. They're starting points, and that's often what happens for me. A lot of my research, and even maybe the story is like a starting point, and then I go from there and it becomes something different. And so that series I'm hoping to grow to at least 100 of those. There's 21 in there right now, and I think I've done 38, and I would like to keep going with it. I would love eventually to do an installation where it's on like 4 walls. What I love about this idea is that for me, the desire to be special is this continuum from just like the honest desire to literally be seen in your life to, it seems like the best example of it gone awry is Trump. So, you know, like the best human example that we're all familiar with, right? So, you know, but they're just like a starting point, and there a way of having a conversation about that sparkle, that extra little thing that we want to be appreciated for in some way or another?
Also love paper, and that's one of the things that took me to print. I'd done seriograph. In college, I did a survey of print, but because of my degree, I didn't have as much time as I would like to at that time to study print. But I had done seriograph, and when I moved to the island, I found out that Valerie Wilson had formed this small, at that time, I think there were only 4 artists who were involved with Quartermaster Press, and Ilse Reimus was one. Anyway, Bonnie Wilkins was another at that time too. Those connections with them kind of were a way for me to work on paper that I'd never thought about before. I drew on paper all my life. I've worn out my thumbs drawing on paper, but I'd never printed in the way that I print now, or the way that those people were printing, which is monotype, where you have an open plate and no real design. That all happens in the press and with stencils in my case, or by wiping through ink. So it's just a very exciting way to find imagery. So I can go to the press with an idea of what I want something to be, but it always informs, the process informs what the subject also ends up being about too.
Well, you guys love paper and I love copper. So I started there because I love the warmth of the copper and how easy it was to form. And I learned from taking classes at Pratt, I learned how to form the copper. And it was a slow process, but I kept at it, and there was limitations for me with it, and pretty soon I thought, I really would like to learn how to braze the copper together, and so it would be seam to seam kind of thing, instead of trying to form it and hammer it every single time I wanted to do a face or whatever. And so pretty soon this gentleman came into my life who knew how to braze, and I learned from him quickly on how to do that. It's a pretty simple process. And so I was doing that for a while, and then I realized that I wanted to do more complex curves with my work, and so I started bringing in clay, and it was a clay that I fired, and then I learned how to stick the rods, create holes into the clay, have it fired, have it so I could stick a copper rod through, say, a neck, come out either side, and then that was a way for me to add on a copper body that I had pre-made, and to weld it, because once the clay is fired, you can bring it up real slow in temperature and it won't explode on you. And so I explored all of that to see, everything was driven by, I want more flexibility in these materials. And then I was a graphic designer, I came from it, and so I wanted to transfer type onto it. And then I wanted to bring color to the copper besides what it was just naturally given, and so I learned to enamel on top of that. And then I joined a group that did found objects, and I was like, oh my gosh, there's grannies. I just went nuts at grannies, and still do. And so that brought in wood, and that brought in other fabrics, and oh my God, I'm all over the place. And I love it. I love the mix of, especially metal. I've always held on to the copper because I love the warmth of it, and I love it in contrast to wood and in contrast to fabric. And so that's where I come from.
Well, I'm all about the oil paint itself. It can go on any surface as long as it's oil paint. And the thing that drew me to oil paint is that you can control the tones so well. So I'm a tonal painter, and that's what gives you that, if you can control your tones, you can get that 3D look on a 2D space. And for me, that's absolutely thrilling. So that is just So it's just such a cool feeling when that happens when you're working. It's just, it never gets old. And oil paint just gives you so much more flexibility to get those tones as opposed to watercolor or acrylic. Charcoal, I would say, is the next closest thing for me where you can really control tone. So.
I don't know if I really put it together that you're so passionate about the actual, materials you were using. I mean, like you get such pleasure out of just actually touching and watching and seeing the actual materials. It's amazing. I'm going to go to all of your full-time artists. So I want to ask a question. If you could tell us one thing that's great about being a full-time artist and one thing that isn't so great. Let's start.
I'll start. Okay, the great thing is you get to do it all the time. I mean, it's just fabulous. The thing that I find the hardest is that, and you just, it's never done. You're like, maybe just leave it here for a little while longer. It's not quite done. So being able to say it's done it's always my challenge.
For me, the really great part is that when I wake up in the morning, I get to go into the studio. So it's pretty much because I can't imagine doing anything else, and I love it so much. So that's a good thing. I think the challenging thing is selling my work and on a consistent basis. Sometimes it goes smooth and it's fine, but other times it's just like hit your head against a brick wall. And so those are my two things.
I would say that the process, I just kind of love all the bits and pieces of it, even the hard ones where I'm not sure what I'm doing next, or I feel, just like I can't possibly face the studio. I think the art world itself, and particularly the gallery system, has been both a real delight when it worked well. I showed with a gallery called Featherston Gallery for about 12 years until she closed, and that was a pretty good experience. But I think mostly that system is really broken, and I appreciate that VCA is offering a different kind of a model, and also the Seattle Art Museum that some of us show at, which is like rental and sales. I'm super interested in getting people to collect and be interested in living with art, and I love that part of it, and I just sometimes don't think the gallery system welcomes everyone, and it's very hard on artists, really hard on artists. And I know there's a lot of alternative models around, and I find that promising. I'm not sure what is going to happen with that, and I have, over the years, found it challenging, and I guess to some extent have chosen not to engage super rigorously in that model. And being able to do the studio tour on the island and have few people walk in, and maybe you buy something, maybe you don't, but at least you see my art, and it's not a white cube with someone behind a desk who's not even acknowledging you. You get to meet the artist, I get to show you my materials, which I am very excited about, and, all the time. And yeah, so it's, it's a business, but it's also a pleasure. It's both.
I like that you separated our gallery from those other ones.
So to also speak to materials, come to my studio and just let me open some drawers. I have so much paper. Sometimes I just have bought it because it's like, it feels good. I don't know how I'm going to use this. So anyway, I don't know how to answer this question because if I don't make, this has kind of been true for out my life. If I don't make art during the day, I don't sleep at night. It's just stuff that I have to get out. So maybe that's the coin. That's the other side of that is not making it. Then that's the bad part when I can't sleep. So I think all parts of it are, and Kathy's, well actually Morgan too spoke to the sales part of that, and that is a very important part hard to not consider and consider it. You have to make it, you should consider it, and but you not just collect your own, you have to sell it. So that's the other, yeah. So, and I do feel very fortunate also to be associated with artists on this island. This really is a magical place. If you live here too long, you forget what the rest of the world is like. But it's a community that supports its own, and is also curious enough to venture out. So they bring that back, and they're very sharing. So it's a great place to live.
Great. I'm going to do a couple more and then we'll open it up. So I'm going to direct this one to Kathy because she mentioned how she really wants to encourage people and to use the words about collecting art and living with art. And so I want you to kind of expand on that, about what you think is a good message as far as being a collector, being a new collector, you know, how you live with art that you make, but also art that other people make.
Yeah, so I've always made art even before I sort of formally became an artist, and I've also always collected art. And I think we're all probably collecting things, and it's artful when we do that. And I think that, you know, back to that, my comments about the gallery system, I think there just need to be more ways to encourage people to not be afraid to buy art, to understand that there is always something you can afford, you know? Even if it's that you found a wonderful painting at Granny's, you know, for $2. No posters on the walls, no posters. There's so much incredible art in the world, and I just really, you know, I don't know, I hear a lot from people, oh, my walls are full. That's bullshit, you know? Your walls are never that full. You can rearrange things, you can deaccession things. Your kid now has an apartment, you let them choose something, whatever you need to do. You know, this whole system of art making has always been pretty circular. There is no beginning, there is no end. People will always make art, and people need to live with art, and people want to live with art. Living with art makes you a better human being. If you get tired of it, move on to the next thing. Kind of no excuses, really, you know? And I hear myself sometimes like, oh, where am I going to put that? And, you know, if you love it and it resonates for you and it speaks to you, then you need to take it home. And if you need to pay $100 a month for the next 3 years, do that. Whatever it is, just do it. It's not frightening. It's not intimidating. It's really critical. You know, we live on this gorgeous island. We all appreciate all the beauty around us. But part of the beauty around us is also what all the artists on the island make, as well as the people Lynn Ann brings in about half the year, people from off island, people like June, who's sitting in the back there, had an incredible show here. There's lots to be seen, and the studio tour is a great way to start collecting art. I've donated a couple of events where I talk about collecting myself and show people my own collection. There's a million ways to hang art. Yeah, just do it. Thank you, Nike.
So one thing that I've enjoyed and become in the last 7 years since I've worked here is I've gone to artists' homes, there's a lot of studios, go to their bathrooms. It's amazing what they have in their bathrooms, starting with Kathy's bathroom. And you know, I thought, who needs a magazine here? You can just sit and take a pee and see all the fabulous art. So I found that artists' homes are really amazing to me, but their bathrooms, it's just like, I was inspired. I went home and redid my, I was like, I'm putting art in my bathroom because I'm in my tub all the time. So. Erin, you had brought up when I'd asked about what anything about talking, as you were like, you said how original work has this historical element. You were wondering how that might be impacted with collecting in the context of reproductions and AI.
Yeah, so our family has been talking a lot about AI, and you know, with you can generate art, and so we've been having arguments. You know, a 16-year-old about, well, what is original, how fine, my husband can look at a poster and find a lot of joy in that versus the original piece. And my son and I were like, but it doesn't have the brush strokes. There's a piece of history missing. You're missing the person in that reproduction. My husband he's not on the same level that Bodhi and I are on. So it's just interesting that, just not everybody appreciates, original artwork or art in the same way. He can appreciate a poster. We're not quite there. We also talked about how music too is different, and you've got live music and then you've got reproductions, right? So it was just an interesting conversation that we've been having, and with AI, it's just looking at some of the AI-generated artwork. You can tell it's been AI-generated. Thank God.
Yeah, actually, because of my background in architecture and architectural illustration as a career, I've looked at how that has evolved through the years, and we chose to treat that early on as making whatever we made look handmade. So we said it was high tech or high touch, and so we were the touchy people, which was watercolor. That was actually why I don't do watercolors, because I had a whole career doing that, and getting paid well for doing it, so I can't do it now. It is a very intriguing thing that the rest of the world is kind of evolving to, but when we were asked to be doing fly-throughs, I was still saying, oh, I can do a series of watercolors and we can do a slideshow. So we are in an interesting place.
Yeah, it's related but not exactly with AI. It's sort of how people buy art, whether they buy it online or not. And in my experience here in the gallery, people right now, it's definitely age-defined. Like younger people are more comfortable buying things online with viewing it online, as opposed to some people are like, no, in the audience. And then other people, or some like to just like scout online, but they need to see it in person. And Dip's even one of the paintings of Joanne's, a woman really wanted it, she scouted, and she couldn't come to First Friday, and she bought something online, and then she came here and stood in front of it. And sheepishly turned to me and said, can I change? And I was like, of course you can. But she realized in the presence of it that another piece spoke to her more. And so it's just interesting too about that, but there's a huge increase in gallery sales and art sales online.
Can I speak to that a little bit?
Sure, absolutely.
So I used to buy art by slide. When they would send it in the mail and you'd get a slide or you'd get the postcard. And, the deal was always, if you're not happy with it, you can send it back. I don't think I ever did. You have to trust yourself, and I think it's great she could show up and change her mind, but I am an older person and I would buy online. I have bought online.
Yeah.
And I have bought that way for a long, long time because I can't be everywhere all at once. And it's a great way the internet has been a great way of introducing me to lots of artists and lots of art and lots of processes that I wouldn't necessarily have a chance to see in person.
Well, that's definitely the case. I think people are getting introduced to it. When I said we launched the online, people did buy online from the artist, having not seen it, and because they couldn't, because they couldn't get into a gallery. But it's a very individual thing, I know. Some people still are holding true to what they feel is they need to be in the presence, and others are okay with online.
I find that one of the things that puts people over the edge to buy there is telling the story and showing the process of making a piece, and especially if you have problems in assembling a piece and then you're working through that with the camera on, people love that stuff. And then when it's finished, they're like, yeah, that's mine.
I think that's true even if in the pieces in here, people, that's why I like to write the stories. I know that you said you're not as thrilled about writing the artist statements, but I have people who didn't know an artist and come in and read the artist statement and resonates, love the art, and then when they read the artist statement, they felt that it was, that, you know, they knew the artist more and they really wanted to be part of that. So I think that's, again, part of the story is to put an artist statement or something about a description of the art. So let's take a breath. I want to thank you guys, but we're not done. I just want to know, I want to give some time for any questions. And if you just speak really loudly, and if we can't hear you, I'll repeat it here, but just go ahead and if anybody have any questions to any particular one or anything in general. Oh, great. We already got, okay, I'll start with this back there.
Hi. I just wanted to speak, Kathy, a little bit to the collecting idea. And, you know, I have art from Kathy and Morgan in my home that I often go to for inspiration when I'm making my own art. And I'm just wondering who that is for each of you. Who do you go to?
So did everybody hear that? She's looking for the inspiration for Kathy and Morgan because she has, their work is inspiring to her.
Oh, I'm all over the place when I look for inspiration. And I admit that I'll go to like Pinterest or something and, you know, or Instagram even, that's not as fruitful for me. Just, you know, scrolling madly. But usually what I find, if that's going on for me, is that I just need to go into the studio and start playing because, and have that attitude that anything goes. You know, that I'm not trying to make it for someone, or I'm not trying to, you know, match the color of one that's sold, you know, such and such a time. I'm just really having fun. And that tends to open creative doors for me.
I would say the same thing. If I get stuck, I just need to spend time, you know. It's not that I don't look at everything all the time. I do that. But I don't really have one person or one place that I go to for inspiration like that. I do read a lot, and actually, you can hear me talking about myth a lot. Myth is, there are, through art history, incredible references through all periods of time. I tend to like the older the better. The closer you get to the Stone Age, I like that better. I also want to just say Morgan has been an inspiration to me as well through my art making. Since I've known her, she's always thinking, and that's inspiring. But whenever I have a chance, and earlier I was talking to Erin about how she was making what she was making, I like to, the next best thing to making art is talking about it. So.
I think living with art, it's not any one particular painting, but I do think a lot of the art I've chosen influences me. And if you came and saw my collection, it's everything from really abstract art to very representational still lifes. And it's not always something I want to paint or want to emulate, but I do think living with all that art has its way with me. I don't know exactly more definitively what it is. I also think because I came to, you know, being like acting as if I was an artist and pretending I was a professional and then becoming one, about, you know, like well into my 30s, I had like almost like, do you guys know what a Rolodex is? Most of you probably do. I had like this Rolodex of ideas. And so I don't know that it's any particular artist. I really needed to have been doing this earlier and wasn't, and so I'm not, it's not like I'm struggling to find ideas. I'm often trying to figure out why that idea, or if that's the one, and how I'm going to approach it, and with what materials and in what way. And also a lot of reading and note-taking and just things that interest me, you know, influences series that I end up doing.
Can I ask a question about that easy question? Were you talking about literal or figurative Rolodex?
Figurative.
Yeah, okay. That's what I heard you were saying. Okay. Go ahead.
How do you ever let go of anything creative? How do you sell it?
How do you let your baby go to college? Or right there by it.
I don't think that's never really been an issue with me because there's always something else that needs to be made.
Because you've moved on.
Yeah, I think, well, not exactly moved on, but it's what, you need to create a vacuum to create into. So it needs to go away so you can think a new thought, for me.
I agree with that, but I also remember early on in my career thinking, okay, part of this deal of you getting to do artwork all the time is you have to always let it go. You make it, you let it go. That is the deal, period. So that's what I do.
I'm going to disagree a little bit with that, because somewhere along the way, maybe I made it up, but I'm pretty sure someone told me, always keep your best work. I suppose the reason for that is that you're going to become deadly famous. Literally dead and famous.
I like this idea.
So, and I can't say that I have done that, but I give myself permission to hold on to things from each series if there's something I love. But I'm not making it to keep it all. It's just part of the process, is that you're making it, hopefully, to go out into the world. And, but sometimes there's a red dot on something when the show opens, and that's because Kathy Sarkowski owns it. Yeah. And also, I think the more salient point about that, which I just remembered, is that those are markers for me. Oftentimes it's the first piece in a series, and it's a marker, and while I may complete that series, it also may take me to the next place. And of course we have gorgeous professional photos and monitors and ways to look at those things, but for me sometimes actually seeing the real artwork is really important for whatever it is I'm going to do in the future. I don't always know what that is, but holding on to it, it is a reference point for me, an actual Rolodex.
This question's for Morgan, and when I look at your work, I often read the titles, and I'm intrigued and thought-provoking. And so my question to you is, do you come up with the titles for your work while you're in the middle of creating it, or do you come up with the titles when you're all finished? I was just curious.
It happens both ways, but mostly it happens after it's all done. Because then I've kind of gone through the whole process of making it, and any surprises that appear inform that title also. So I like to take it all and mush it together, and there you go.
She tends to have long titles.
Yeah, I do.
They're great titles. Go ahead, Jude.
It's the story.
Yeah, there you go.
I have a question for Erin. I continue to be fascinated as I look at your art over the last years about how you mix portraiture with the natural world in such amazing and interesting ways.
Did everybody hear that?
No,
She's saying, yeah, she's, go ahead, you want to say it again
Yeah, I
louder?
can say it again. How you mix portraiture with the natural world so well. And many of these that are here, for instance, look magical to me. I mean, so can you talk about how you mix those two?
Yeah, I mean, I think really I love creating characters. And initially when I was younger, I thought, oh, there's no way I would ever paint a dog. Because I thought, oh, that's not, I was classically trained, and you didn't do portraiture. And then I started painting animals, and I'm like, oh my God, this is so much fun. And animals have as much character as people. And so, and I've always felt like we're all, together on this earth, and there's really not that much that separates us, all the creatures. And so just playing around with these character developments and how we interact with each other has just been an ongoing theme. Go ahead, Bruce.
Yeah, we're all about the same age, and this has been kind of a remarkable time to be an artist. I think these last 30 years, there have been some other highlights probably around the printing press, around the start of photography, in terms of what happened to the world of imagery. And over the last 30 years, one of the big things I see is this absolute tsunami, overwhelming wave of imagery that comes at you from every possible source. And when probably we were all back in college, we were kind of taking similar classes and probably looked at similar books and those kinds of things and had local artists, but there was a much narrower stream of visual imagery. And now, not only the amount of imagery, but the channels that it comes at you through. As you mentioned AI already, which I didn't want to stay away from that conversation, although it doesn't scare me at all. It is unbelievable, this wave of imagery that's everywhere. So in terms of how you respond to that and making your imagery, where you think your imagery will have a home in this absolute Mississippi of imagery flowing out in the world. Do you respond to that at all? Are you aware of that at all? Or is that just a non-issue to you? I'm very aware of what's going on there. And sometimes I'm intimidated, and sometimes I'm absolutely thrilled. And there's so much material out there to come across and respond to and gather for yourself too.
I think, go ahead.
I consider my Instagram addiction to be research.
Yeah.
I find it pretty exciting. And also I find the camera on my iPhone pretty incredible. And I love that it's always with me. I don't love how freaked out I feel if I've forgotten it. But I have, 35,000 photos on my, and some of them are documentation of events, but a lot of them are just things that interest me. And I think, again, to the Rolodex idea, like, why am I taking those images? What am I going to do with them later? How are they influencing me? Again, I don't know that I need to know the answers to all those questions, but I know that they are influencing me, just like the art around me, just like the nature around me, the people around me, the animals, wildlife around me, all of it. I don't really know what to say about the AI part of it. I do know that, many years ago already, artist friends of mine were having weird things happen, like someone would be in Thailand and they would have just taken a photo, and in the background was like wall covering made from someone's painting, the Seattle artist's painting. So this has been going on, like stealing images or borrowing them or whatever has been going on for a while. And, short of like watermarking every photo and whatever, I guess I hope people still have a conscience and some kind of ability to discern reality from lack thereof.
Were you going to say something, Brian?
Actually, you kind of covered where I was going. I think that in terms of that barrage of imagery, it helps to live here on this island because, and it's one of the reasons I'm not a landscape artist or anything either, because we're surrounded by so much of that absolute beauty that I can go into my own special world. And that's what informs me still, so I can look at other things and I still see my lens is my lens kind of thing.
I totally agree with that, Fran. And I totally agree with everything that you said about, tsunami of images and stuff. And sometimes that has hit me and I get all whipped up and, it's overwhelming. But usually I settle myself down pretty quick because I think no one's going to create stuff like I do because it's just too weird. And it's dependent on what I find at Granny's. So it's never going to be out there. I just don't feel that people are going to be imitating my work. So I feel like I got my own world and my own path, and I'm just going to keep going on that, no matter AI or what.
Kind of going back to the topic of the show, how has your art or your art making changed you? Or do you have a moment or when you were working on something and you felt like life is suddenly different, something just happened as a result of my creating?
I think that happens for me frequently, and I don't know if it's just about concentration it's experience. I've never get into drugs here. I've never been very much interested in altering my consciousness through drugs or anything. But I had that experience when I'm really concentrating when I'm making art. So I think that's what I'm having.
Even you don't have anything to compare.
Not much. Yeah, there's like this shift. And it happens, if I'm making things, it happens. So.
I have to say, I'm a person who's been in recovery almost 35 years, and my biggest fear of stopping doing drugs was that I would no longer be creative. And so, while it is not necessarily a drug-related experience, the satisfaction that comes from having an idea or even just like following my intuition through a piece, knowing when it's finished, feeling satisfied with it, is better than any drug I ever did. And it's probably why I haven't gotten bored with making art, you know, and that and the Rolodex.
And I would say, for me, art, or when I'm painting, is kind of my ground. And so I feel absolutely unchanged through the process. I feel like, oh, this is my home, this is what I should be doing, and I have no pull to do anything else. So it's like a constant.
Oh, yeah, what you said, I think is more the way it feels for me. Certainly there's times when some new way of putting something together strikes seemingly out of the blue, and I'll just get giddy beyond belief, because I love that discovery. But does it change me in the way you're describing? I don't know about that, but it's very exciting, and it's part of what I live for.
I want to say one more thing about that, if I could, which is that I think the freedom to make and create is really huge. And so I think that freedom allows us to keep changing. And to me, that's the best part about aging, is being an aging artist, I get to keep evolving and changing. It's not in any kind of prescribed way, or I don't know, but I do think it changes me and challenges me, and that I grow as a result of it. But it's not really necessarily like anything else I've ever done, like the things I did previously. So.
Art becomes?
Art becomes you, and it becomes us.
Oh my God. And that's the end of the whole thing. And the person who really likes to write, and the one who is in the back. I love the best. So one of the things for me about this conversation and also is that I really feel that we're all artists. And that, it's interesting that here are artists that were full-time and didn't call themselves artists, and they just had to say it, that they were artists. And to me, I think you can show your artistic creativity in a lot of different ways. I give the example of my daughter who when she was young, cooked a meal and then rearranged it on her plate just so beautifully. And I mean, she actually made a flower and did, it was just so artistic. So I hope that this just gives us all permission to look around, bring art into our home, into our lives, in whatever way that looks like, and to be creative in whatever you do. So I thank you all for coming. Thank you. I really want to thank everyone. Give a big round of applause for these. They're going to stick around too, hopefully.